Hey, what's up? My name is Yardfish, and I have done terrible things over the course of my life. I don't put butter on my bread when I make grilled cheese sandwiches. I don't put milk in cereal either. I had no idea that these acts were considered immoral until I was like in my 30s. And now I live a life in repentance, trying to atone for what I've done. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to pull that off and be heaven bound at the end of all of it. But I can tell you that the individual that I'm going to be discussing today is far worse than I could ever be. Stacey Storey, one of the most prolific producers of content that has ever existed within the monkey torture community. So here is a very quick recap in case you've never seen any of my videos or you don't know anything about this kind of stuff. I have spent the last 3 to 4 years investigating, documenting, and archiving the activities of a bunch of degenerate weirdos on the internet who really like seeing baby monkeys get tortured, sexually abused, and killed, and they pay for these privileges. It was one of the largest global animal crush rings out there, and it began on YouTube. That's it in a nutshell. You can find supplemental information for this on my channel or from various mainstream media write-ups on the issue. So let's start talking about Skeletor's grandmother over here. Initially, when myself and my friend Lucy, who ran the YouTube channel MMM Mayhem, which has since been taken down by YouTube, first started looking into this community of monkey torturers, Stacey's name popped up constantly in the comment sections for many of the videos featuring the abuse of baby monkeys, usually going by a variation of the name Sadistic, whether it be Sadistic Mind, Sadistic Queen, Sadistic whatever. She was everywhere. If there was a video of a baby monkey being abused on YouTube somewhere, she was almost guaranteed to be in the comment section with multiple comments. And hers really stood out not only because of their frequency, but also because of their, tendency to be very sexually deviant. This woman would constantly be making comments about sticking foreign objects up these baby monkeys' behind, messing with their genitals, or sticking things up their urethra. Like, we were well versed in the degeneracy of monkey molesters and monkey torturers at this point in time, but she really took it to another level entirely. She genuinely seemed to eat, drink, and sleep monkey torture. It seemed like it was her reason for being, for just existing in general. What was also very interesting is the fact that she appeared to be using a photograph of her actual self, her real face. This was not particularly uncommon back then. A lot of these monkey molesters / monkey torturers, they had no concept of OPSEC back then. They would just use their actual real names, their real photos of themselves, and just gleefully upload that onto YouTube while commenting the most deranged and depraved shit imaginable. Unironically, this is how we ended up catching and finding quite a few of these people early on. Just a random segue here for a moment, but when I made my first video on the monkey torture community, these people got so butthurt, they immediately began spamming my comment section. As this stuff was not really being covered by anyone else, this was like their one outlet. And they got really mad at the jokes and the mockery that I made at their expense, and they made that known in the comment section. You can probably still go to that video and see some of them. I don't know if they're still up, but I thought that was incredibly funny. These people are incredibly thin-skinned and very emotionally incontinent, and once I realized that they were using their real names and their real photos and stuff like that, I doubled down on the insulting and the mockery in my other videos to piss them off as much as I possibly could. And it absolutely worked. For the sake of reference, Natalie Heron, a woman from Scotland who was recently sentenced for distributing monkey porn. I found her because this dumbass could not help but respond to one of my videos with a YouTube account bearing her actual real name. These mentally deficient hookworms never at any point stopped to seriously consider that law enforcement might legitimately be coming after them for the things that they were doing. That idea was so completely foreign to them. And as for Natalie, she had in her possession a 750 gigabyte ice drive archive that was entirely filled with videos of monkeys either taking a shit or being forcibly bathed. I genuinely have no idea what a 30-something-year-old mother of, I don't know how many kids she has, I have no idea what she was planning to be doing with that monkey poop scooping. That is beyond my understanding. But I do hope that her prison stay does provide her with a degree of mental clarity and help her understand that she can survive just fine without videos of soiled monkey diapers. It is possible, Natalie. You just have to believe. Anyway, back to talking about Stacey. Yeah, so she was one of those people also appearing to use a profile picture of herself, which gave us something to go on. And also, there was the contents of her YouTube channel itself, where she uploaded a number of videos featuring baby monkeys. Once again, these videos were often very weirdly sexual in nature. You had your usual videos of like skinned monkeys and stuff, but she also specifically uploaded videos with titles like flickering monkey bunghole, or a video of a monkey ejaculating, or videos of baby monkeys essentially touching their own genitals for an extended period of time. So yeah, we were definitely under the impression that the person that we were looking for was a next level pervert, even amongst a community filled with high-level perverts. But we just kind of assumed that she was some kind of no-lifer who was binging monkey torture content, and that was maybe the extent of it. We were very, very wrong about that. And once we actually started getting into the Telegram groups owned by these people, myself and Lucy discovered no, Stacey went way beyond the level of simply being an enthusiast. No, Stacey was one of the core suppliers for some of the most extreme and explicit content that was being produced by this community. She and her VO were very much in great demand, the most demand, I would say, and that is for a very simple and straightforward reason. Her VO was willing to do what the other VOs would not, the most extreme possible things. And in fact, they had a kill-only rule. And by that, I mean they refused to make any videos wherein the baby monkey in question would simply be tortured and then left alive to be tortured another day over a period of time, which is what some VOs did. No, if they made a video, that baby monkey that was going to be the victim was going to be dead at the end of it. This was apparently for security reasons on their end, but it made the fact that they were willing to kill so easily one of their most appealing features, because during the time where Stacey was operating back between 2021 2022, the VOs that were active during that time were not quite like that. And to clarify, a VO refers to essentially a video operator. It was originally used to describe the guys that would film baby monkeys and stuff at Cambodia, the Angkor Wat, but then it just became a generic term for anybody who films videos featuring monkeys and baby monkeys and so on. So during the height of Stacey's career, there were essentially three major players who were active when it came to creating this type of content on the VO end of things. The first was a guy called OK Bro. He was, in many ways, I guess you can consider him the subject of that BBC documentary, Saving Minnie. This guy used YouTube to advertise samples of his content. You know, he'd upload little clips of baby monkeys being terrified with implied abuse, and then he would drop a link in his description to his Telegram or how he can be contacted through other means. And then people would message him regarding requests for that type of content. However, he was kind of disliked heavily by a lot of people within that community itself because he was viewed as way too soft. He very rarely ever killed the monkeys in possession. A lot of times when they did die, it was accidentally. For the most part, he usually filmed himself in his bathroom, messing and interfering with a bunch of different baby monkeys, with his absolute favorite being teeny tiny little Minnie, who was one of the monkeys that he sexually abused on camera, as per the request of his buyers. Over the course of that BBC investigation, he was catfished, identified, and then he was sent to jail. And this dude was pathetic, even by the standards of monkey molesters in general. He's crying in that BBC documentary talking about how his monkeys loved him, but he was such a depraved father. But it's a grown-ass married man who's spending hours of his evenings locked in a bathroom, split-splashing and torturing and caressing a bunch of little baby monkeys while giggling like hee 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 the entire time. Like, I don't know what to say about that besides just you failed at everything. You will never be able to experience success again in your entire life because you have to undo all of the negative failure points that you've accumulated. And he can't do that in one lifetime. So yeah, the point is he was not particularly respected by anyone, both in and outside of that community for the most part, because he was such a creepy little twerp. Now, the next video was a guy called Mas Bichette. And this dude was a YouTuber who masqueraded as an animal shelter owner, somebody who was here to rehabilitate monkeys and help them on their journey back into the wild after, I don't know, getting captured by farmers or something. And that's just sinister when you think about it in almost every single way. This guy is out here pretending to care about these animals when in reality he was taking cash from a bunch of foreigners to torture and abuse these animals. And in a particularly nasty twist, he would often upload videos of the aftermath of his tortures, where these animals were very grievously wounded and he was pretending to treat them for injuries that they just magically sustained running around the back of his house, apparently, like getting their heads cracked open or their arms torn apart. But good guy Mas was over here to save the day. Mas, unlike OK Bro though, was a little bit more open to killing the monkeys in his care and his possession. And he was also very, very open to communication at pretty much all times. Like a person in this community could just call him up pretty much whenever, ask him if he's willing to do a video, and he'd be down for it. He didn't really care that much about security or anything for that matter, because Mas had a problem that made him not really the ideal choice for a lot of people in this community, which is the fact that he was drunk and high 99% of the time. People would constantly complain that he would not get the shots that they wanted. He wasn't actually doing what they wanted. He could barely read. So he'd just do whatever the hell he wanted for most of the videos that he was paid for. And his camera was just absolute trash. And despite the money that he had been raking in, I'm assuming he spent most of it on drugs and alcohol as opposed to a new camera, which was a constant source of infuriation for these people. The fact that the monkeys themselves also died off camera a lot of the times, because Mas would often get drunk and in some cases forget to feed them or forget to treat their wounds. And if it's one thing a monkey molester hates, it's a baby monkey dying and them not getting to do a little looky look while their fingers get a little bit sticky. So he was not choice number one either. And as an aside, once Mas figured out that people were coming after him, that they were looking into the people producing these types of videos, he kind of just up and disappeared. He was never arrested. So remember this face. You might probably come across him slumped over in a drain somewhere, crying about how perverts don't pay him the big bucks anymore to do strange and unusual things to baby monkeys. And now VO number 3 is Stacey's VO. And after everything I said, you would probably kind of understand why he was in such high demand. I'm saying he, but in reality, it wasn't a one-person operation. No, somehow Stacey Storey got in touch with some guy in Indonesia who knew a couple other guys who were willing to make videos of baby monkeys being tortured relatively cheaply. This guy, let's call him Z. He was never apprehended during the course of this investigation. Perhaps he was one of the only smart people involved in the entire thing. Once he found out the people were coming after him, he disappeared, like Mas. But essentially, however Stacey met this guy, I am not privy fully to that knowledge, but Stacey would essentially send him the details for any video that she wanted made. This guy would then provide that information to his little torture gimp, Asep, who was basically a brainlet. He was an idiot, a dumbass, and an animal smuggler whose only real asset and value to these people lay in the fact that he was willing to do pretty much anything. He lacked any sort of scruples whatsoever. So if Stacey asked these freaks to do something, they was gonna do it. Not really gonna have a whole lot of questions asked, well, except for clarification, I suppose, because English wasn't exactly their first language. But their willingness to do what other VOs taught was a bit too far, a bit too perverse, is what made them extremely popular. This could be anything from dismembering a baby monkey while it's still alive to sodomizing one with a burning stick. It didn't really matter to them, and that gave her a sort of premium prestige in this community that, in a lot of ways, has never been matched since. She was kind of their queen, and this arrogant little Alabama swamp creature took to calling herself that sadistic queen. She was so arrogant and proud of this fact that she started watermarking her videos with her own little insignia. She was one of the first people, if not the first individual in this community to really start doing that kind of thing. So again, juxtaposed against the two other, shall we say, lightweight VOs, it's easy to understand why she and her guys were in such high demand. And at the height of her career, she was essentially making one video a week. So one baby monkey dying per week. Once myself and Lucy found out how prominent she actually was and how many videos she had been cranking out and just how depraved those videos were, she became our prime directive. We jumped into this kind of stuff as deep as we did, specifically to get to her and eventually stop her in some way. We began accumulating whatever evidence and details that we could fish up. One particularly important bit, of course, was provided to us by Michael McCartney, or Torture King, who is now in jail. He just handed over her old Facebook account, which was very much appreciated. Granted, it was a much older Facebook account that she hadn't used in quite some time, but it was definitely recognizable as her. The woman from those images on her YouTube comments. And there were quite a few interesting things in there, such as the fact that she had been turning over a new leaf and was now a brave soldier in the army of Jesus Christ. And she's posting like goofy ass photos of herself with those annoying little dog ears filters on it and a bunch of like really saccharine stuff. It kind of threw me for a loop. I think it kind of threw everybody for a loop when we saw that. Looking at her friends and family, they had no idea what this person was actually like. But hey, at least we knew that she was in Alabama now and what she looked like and what her supposed name actually was. Stacey Michelle. So it should be only a matter of time before we actually get this person dealt with, right? But things became a bit more complicated than that. We eventually met up with those journalists from the BBC and we started working with them on their investigation and feeding them the details that we had already acquired. And Stacey was a prime target for being a centerpiece in that documentary. I think she was initially supposed to be the focal point, but her story ended up being so messed up and just unbelievable in so many ways that I think they ended up going with okay bro, because it's simply a lot more palatable and there was actually some kind of resolution to everything in the sense that they were able to rescue the baby monkey that he mostly fixated on, Minnie. If they were to focus on Stacey, the kind of things that they would have to put out there was going to be unacceptable to a lot of people. And they already had to cut so many things from the documentary as it were. It's kind of understandable. Now, as this investigation clankered on, Stacey just continued producing videos, and they seemed increasingly more and more extreme with her pushing the boundaries as to what she really wanted to do. Some of these videos were very elaborate, mimicking medieval torture methods that she saw somewhere. I seriously doubt she can actually read, so I think she probably saw it in some kind of true crime YouTube thing somewhere, such as a video where baby monkey was subjected to a stripado, and monkey molesters far and wide were all scrambling from many different groups to send her money and gain favor with her. She was a member of many different groups across many different factions within this community, but she had one very small group that only had probably less than a dozen members at most. Those were her most trusted people. And she garnered the respect, I guess, of these creatures by being particularly egalitarian with her videos. She didn't really charge a lot of money and she gave her videos away for free. For the most part, she really looked at this sort of thing as a badge of honor, a source of pride. This was her content, as denoted by the watermarks that she loved slapping on her videos. And the best of them would be relegated to only her most trusted friends. This did make her a bit of a rarity in this entire community. I don't think there's ever really been anybody else like that who did it entirely because they enjoyed monkey fondling, monkey torturing, and monkey raping. Almost everybody else involved in the production and sale of content within this community was always trying to get as much money as they possibly could from their contributions. Except, I suppose, for a certain mentally handicapped, skinny Austrian twink, who we might discuss one day soon. So again, Stacey was venerated by these people, and she just wanted to keep going, to keep pushing boundaries and making something that is more and more extreme, something that would really shock everyone. And one day she decided to drop what she considered her Magnum Opus after teasing it in a couple chats a few days before. It was a video featuring a newborn baby monkey being very brutally tortured, having its eyes gouged out by a pair of scissors, and then sodomized and impaled on a sharpened stick as the cameraman just kind of sits back and films as it slowly dies by choking on its own vomit before setting its genitals on fire. This video was by far the most messed up shit that we had ever seen at that point in time, and it kind of cracked something in my head. The The very next morning, we had a group call with members of the BBC to discuss what we had just seen. This was depraved and psychotic on a different level entirely. There were a lot of people in there, as well as other people that we had worked with, who did not think that there was some kind of weird sexual thing going on here where these people were using these monkeys as like a proxy for something else. As time went on, people's doubts gradually dissipated, and when this video dropped, all of those doubts just flew right out the window. And during that meeting, I professed that, we need to release this woman's identification out there to the public so that she can at least stop doing what she's doing. She's killing a ton of these animals every month. But I was eventually talked out of it with the promise that, she will eventually genuinely face justice. You do this, you're probably not going to get her. She's going to DFE and she's going to disappear and nothing is ever going to come of it. You might stop what's happening in the moment, but you're not going to get her. And they reassured me that while this specifically was kind of new, they had already worked on so many cases that showed them that it is always best to wait and do this properly. I kind of doubted that would happen. I did not think that the feds would actually take something like this seriously. I thought they would just say like, it's just animal shit, who cares? But they were vindicated recently. And for a bit of context as to why this bothered me as much as it did, back where I grew up in Trinidad, which is an island in the Caribbean in the middle of nowhere, it's a little dot near Venezuela. When I was a kid, something happened on that island that kind of went down in history for us. Everybody who was alive back then, they remember what happened. There was this kid called Sean Luke, just like some regular 7-year-old child, right? Going about his business, doing 7-year-old things, I assume. And one day, he just completely disappeared. And a lot of people got busy looking for him. Like, where did this child go? We need to find him. We need to go out there. We need to look for him. And we need to bring him back home. People took it pretty seriously, but it didn't take them long to actually find out what happened to him. They found this child in a cane field, the middle of a cane field. He had been beaten. He had been tortured. He had been sodomized. He had a piece of sugar cane inserted into his rectum, forced all the way through his body until it popped out of his mouth. Tortured, sodomized, and impaled, and then left to slowly die. The fear of losing a child is something that I assume most competent parents have to live with for their entire life. It is a kind of terror that I do not know. I've never experienced it, but I can potentially empathize with it. I know what loss feels like. I'm assuming it's that amped up like 50 times or something. So as a parent, seeing your deceased child is always going to provoke an extremely painful, anguished response. But what parent wakes up in the morning considering that they are going to find their child in a state like that? I cannot even estimate or comprehend what something like that is soul destroying. And even though most of Trinidad wasn't apparent to this child, it created outrage that I have never seen since. People was tearing shit up. They wanted this kill and they wanted him now. And again, it didn't take long for them to find the killer, or killers in this case. It was his neighbors, and they were children. I think one was 13 and the other was 16. And they had been friends with this child for most of his life. And then one day, seemingly out of the blue, they told him, hey, you want some candy or something? Come with us. And they lured him into this cane field where they just, for whatever reason, tortured and killed this child. And then went back home to eat their mother rice and peas or something. Like, I've never seen anything like that. People wanted their blood. When they showed up at the courtroom for their prosecution and whatnot, they had like an entire police escort that even the most hardened criminals don't typically get. And they were there to protect them, obviously, from a crowd that would have unquestionably torn them to pieces and scattered their limbs across the street if they could actually get a hand on them. We never got an explanation for why they did what they did. They just got locked up and the key was tossed away, and everybody else was happy with that. But that memory haunts our collective consciousness. And seeing that video reminded me of that. So I already hated Stacy, but after seeing that video, that hatred was multiplied times 10. So we redoubled our efforts to find this diseased boglin, scouring through her videos and her text messages to find anything that can give clues as to her location. With some of the most important things that were dug up, including a license plate, the wilderness locations featured in some of the videos, as well as a very, very distinct bracelet that showed up on Asep's hands in most of his torture videos. Now, while I did submit this evidence to the BBC and Lady Freethinker and Action for Primates and stuff, I couldn't really do anything with it on my own. That came down to the work of a number of NGOs that were located in Indonesia themselves, and I never got to learn their names, who were able to take a lot of that information and find exactly where these people were based on it. So a lot of credit goes to them. It also didn't help that Asep, like I mentioned before, was not the type of person to do his ancestors proud with his intellect. He was a dumbass. This dude was openly posting videos on TikTok with his torture drill. I wish I had some of them pictures, but I don't. But he was arrested during the course of that BBC documentary, and they had to work quite a bit to figure out a way how to actually get this guy in jail for any kind of decent amount of time, because Indonesia, their animal protection laws are kind of terrible. He would probably only get a few months max if they just hit him with a basic animal cruelty charge. Instead, they used his animal smuggling operation against him, and he was hit with smuggling an endangered animal, which added on a couple months to his sentence. Either way, I doubt he enjoyed his time in jail, and now his goofy ass face just now on the internet forever associated with monkey fondling. Stacy, however, was a bit more tricky because, hey, we had her name. We knew who she was. We had her photographs. We knew she's in Alabama. What is the problem here? And the problem, unfortunately, was apparently how these types of investigations work within the US. It was kind of a headache to figure these things out, where you have law enforcement agencies clashing on a state level as well as a federal level. On a federal level, these types of crimes, the creation and distribution of crushed content, is it's a federal offense, and it can get you anywhere between like 4 to 7 years in jail. But individual states also have their own laws regarding animal cruelty in some cases, and that can take precedent, and then there can be this weird jostling between different agencies. And in this one, apparently a lot of the law enforcement in Alabama were very, very hesitant to pursue this case. I heard tell, now this is hearsay, I want to clarify that the Alabama State Police thought the BBC was some kind of like liberal outlet trying to run some kind of hit piece on the state that was clearly the most respected in the entire US, Alabama. So there was a whole bunch of confufflance just tied up in that entire thing. But it was made even more complicated when we discovered that Stacey Michelle was not really her actual name. That was her fake name. No, her real actual name, I am not joking about this, her real name is Stacey Storey. The name that sounds fake, the name that sounds like it belongs to the author of shitty prison fiction, is her real name, not Stacey Michelle. And then there was another Facebook account of hers that was uncovered that painted a very different picture, one that is way more in line with the Stacey that we knew from the other one I told you about, where she posts videos of her engaging in what looked like some light S&M play with some dude, interspersed with pictures and photographs of her children. There would be just like a whole bunch of photos on her Facebook page that are just all about weird sexual shit. And then boom, all of a sudden she drops a photo of her child in there and talks about how much she loves them, how precious they are, blah, blah, blah. It was some bizarre, degenerate whiplash that just made her seem even creepier to us. But eventually, the journalists involved in this documentary decided that they were going to do something pretty ballsy. I had no idea they were going to do it at the time. They just straight up went to her place of work and confronted her. They didn't want to do it at her house because she does have a disabled adult son there, and they didn't really want to cause conflict on that front. So at her place of work, it was. And watching that clip, seeing how everything unfolded, that was the first time in my entire life that I got to lay eyes on the person that we had been hunting for so long in their truest form. Stacey Storey had been using photographs of herself from a much better time. It couldn't even be that long ago. Like, this had to have been like maybe 15 years ago tops, but I think it's way less than that. I remember there was this ad campaign for meth awareness that was often shown on cable TV and stuff back in the day. This right here is the only thing they needed to show you. This woman was 47 years old when this was shot. That journalist confronting her is only like a couple years younger than her. This blew my mind. I genuinely did not know what to say when I first saw this. But if it's one thing that I've definitely learned since I've started doing this, is that drug addiction, drug abuse is a common constant among most of the people that are involved in this community. And when I say drug use, I mean hard drug use, stuff like heroin and meth being the most common. So many of these monkey molesters who were really into it were either addicts or former addicts. That's just a relatively consistent thing that we've noticed. And Stacy fit that pattern to an absolute T. She even apparently had to have a dental procedure done so that her teeth could be removed because they had been rotted by meth use. What I'm trying to say here is the same thing that all them G.I. Joe cartoons used to be trying to tell you back in the day. Don't take drugs, because somehow, somewhere, you eventually gonna end up wanting to stick your fingers in some monkey's bunghole as a result. And do you really want that to be your legacy? Stay in school, and ice cream is cheaper than meth. But anyway, back to Stacy. Following that confrontation with those journalists on the BBC, she was eventually raided and picked up by the police, who interrogated her, questioned her, but she would not be formally charged until quite a few months later. I'm assuming they took that opportunity to squeeze as much information from her as they possibly can regarding her clients. So good luck to them, at least the ones that aren't already in jail. It was kind of annoying just waiting around for her to actually be sentenced. It took quite some time. But it was oh so satisfying to see that finally take place, and I was treated to some genuinely hilarious stuff coming from her defense. They attempt to exonerate her by talking about how she's had such a traumatic past that's been filled with abuse and just terrible living conditions, untreated trauma that was never addressed. And that's what led her to commit her crimes. They even looked at the other individuals who had been arrested and sentenced prior to her, such as Drexel Venero or Jeff Radke, where they said things like, well, these guys could afford therapy on stuff like that. They had support systems in place. You're trying to hold her against their standards, and that's just not fair. Our poor Stacy war story is completely broke. How is she supposed to navigate her trauma without therapy? How is she supposed to know that it's wrong to take the apparently very little money that you actually earn and then pay some dude in a random Southeast Asian country to torture a bunch of infant animals? How would anybody know that something like that might be a little bit immoral without external guidance? At one point, and again, no joke, it's brought up that she was like Walmart Employee of the Month, and that is something that should be taken into consideration regarding her amazing and pristine character. Can a Walmart Employee of the Month really be that bad? She also appeared to use one of her own children as a shield, claiming that he is 700 pounds and completely disabled and requires her attention to be able to function normally, which is, you know, Stacy, why didn't you think about that when you were committing your crimes? Why is the welfare of your child only now crossing your mind when you were about to get your ass thrown in jail? She also, like quite a few of these people when caught, claims to suffer from depression and OCD, and these factors contributed greatly to her going down this particular path. And I take offense to most of what's being said here because, look, I am also broke as hell. I also suffer from pretty severe OCD, and yet I'm not out there paying dudes to do this kind of stuff. I hate when people use these kind of sob stories as an excuse and then others fall for it. There are millions of people out there in this world that are suffering from the same issues that plagued Stacey Storey. They didn't turn out like her. Her acts were willful and deliberate, and at one point, the defense even tries to argue that some of the other guys that were sentenced with this kind of stuff, unlike Miss Storey, were seen making very diabolical and depraved statements regarding the torture of these animals, and Stacy would never do anything like that, despite literally hundreds of comments to the contrary. But needless to say, none of this stuff actually worked. She was sentenced to 36 months, I think, in jail, I believe. I want to use this opportunity to bring something up that I saw very, very early on when we started infiltrating these groups. Stacey Storey clipped a little segment from one of my videos where I highlighted her YouTube channel and pointed her out as one of the most depraved people in this community. She would then show that to members of her Telegram chats and so on, completely unprompted, being like, yo, I was on Yardfish once. I'm a celebrity. All us monkey molesters, we try to get on that Yardfish channel. You know, that's how we know we made it. Well, congratulations, Stacey. You made it. You won. Good luck with the meth withdrawal in prison, grandma. So the curtains have closed on yet another monkey molester, and there is more to come. This video is nowhere near as detailed as I would have liked it to be, but this happened pretty much like 2.5 years ago. So much of our archive, our evidence files, they're just buried amongst hundreds, in some cases thousands of other files and screen caps and all of that kind of stuff, and it is a pain to go looking for that, to really put together the type of video that I would want to. And I just don't have as much time to do that anymore. Sometimes it'll take like 2 hours just finding the screen cap that I need that's only going to be on screen for like 1 or 2 seconds. Because back then I was not quite as organized as I am today. And I'm still very not that organized when it comes to this kind of stuff. But I just wanted to get this out there, even if it is bare bones. So thanks for watching if you did. And Stacey, me and Lucy, we spent quite a few months looking for you. Months of our lives that we will never get back. In a weird sort of way, we kind of developed a bond with you despite never saying a single word to you. You became kind of near and dear to our hearts in a very upside down way. So I guess I'll just finish this video off with a loving tribute over the credits. Goodbye.
All right, thank you very much for the